Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to Cloud Champion. Today we have Alexander, Architect Cloud Azure, and Martin, SAP on Azure Solution Architect, both from Tech Data. They are going to talk about Azure and SAP on Azure Backup and high availability. Before starting, I want to remind you that you have available in the question section where you can send us your doubts and at the end they will be answered by our speakers. So please, Alexander, go ahead.
Sure.
I will. Yep. Thank you. Gracias, Andrea. Vamos a hacer esta primera introducción en español. Si os parece a todos, vamos a dejar 2 minutos de tiempo para que los atendís podáis conectaros y ver que todo funciona correctamente. Y en 2 minutos, a las 10:03, empezamos. Gracias. We will start in 2 minutes. Buenos días a los que os vais conectando. En 1 minuto empezamos. Gracias. Vamos viendo que van subiendo los asistentes. En 1 minutito empezamos. Perfecto, pues muchas gracias a todos por asistir a este Microsoft Cloud Day de Tech Data, donde hablamos de SAP on Azure. En primer lugar, me presento, yo soy Rafa Morales, Business Unit Manager de Software and Cloud de Tech Data. Y hoy nos acompañan a Alexander y Martin de nuestro Centro de Excelencia a nivel europeo y ambos tienen muchísima experiencia en SAP. Estamos hablando que Martin ha trabajado en proyectos para SAP durante 20 años y Alexander ha estado más de 7 años trabajando en arquitecturas vinculadas a Azure y, por supuesto, en estos últimos años con SAP. Como bien sabéis, este es un evento donde nosotros dedicamos, o es uno de los 3 eventos que nosotros vamos a dedicar dentro de SAP en Azure. Ya realizamos uno el día 10 de febrero sobre los básicos de SAP en Azure y cuáles son las principales arquitecturas, donde hablamos pues una introducción de SAP en Azure, donde hablamos cuáles son las principales arquitecturas, cómo podemos ver cuáles son los puntos a optimizar, cuáles son las preguntas recurrentes que nos podemos encontrar por parte de un cliente final, de vuestros clientes, y estuvimos abordando diferentes preguntas. Hoy, la sesión de hoy, o las próximas sesiones, en concreto la de hoy, hablaremos sobre Azure Backup y arquitecturas muy focalizado en High Availability. Y el próximo día 10 de marzo realizaremos la última sesión donde hablaremos sobre SAP on Azure referente a migración y a cotizaciones. En primer lugar, agradecer que muchos de vosotros nos disteis la enhorabuena por esta primera sesión de Azure Infraestructura de Azure, de arquitectura y los básicos de Azure, así que me alegro muchísimo de que fuera de vuestra utilidad. Esta sesión es en inglés, como sabéis, pero nosotros contamos con un equipo local que está en contacto tanto con Martin como con Alexander para poder trabajar a vuestros proyectos. Tanto en español como en inglés nos podemos adaptar sin problema. ¿Qué es lo que vamos a ver en el día de hoy? Hoy tendremos una hora y cuarto aproximadamente, más luego vuestras preguntas, que por supuesto podéis hacer a través de Questions and Answers. Y hoy hablaremos sobre Azure Backup y High Availability. ¿Cuáles son los puntos que vamos a cubrir en la sesión de hoy? Azure y SAP, una introducción a esta metodología o a esta manera de trabajar el backup. ¿Qué es lo que tenemos que tener en cuenta cuando hablamos de un backup de SAP? ¿Cuál es la arquitectura en Azure? ¿Cómo funciona este backup? Por supuesto, la posibilidad de trabajar con fabricantes terceros, cloud providers terceros, especialistas en backup terceros que vosotros confiáis y que preferís que este backup sea hecho por terceros, pero dentro de Azure. Esa es una muy buena posibilidad y para mí un punto muy importante. Luego, por supuesto, abordaremos lo que conocemos como High Availability de SAP en Azure, muy vinculado o trataremos puntos como puede ser el Disaster Recovery, ¿no? Cómo funciona un Disaster Recovery en Azure dentro de una arquitectura de SAP. Por supuesto, no es tan común como lo que nos hemos encontrado o que nos podemos encontrar en un día a día en una arquitectura similar. Y, por supuesto, el último punto, abordaremos cualquier tipo de pregunta. Simplemente recordad que esta sesión está siendo grabada, que el día 3 de marzo hablaremos sobre migraciones y cómo podemos cotizar nuestros proyectos. Sin más, ahora sí, pasamos a la parte de la sesión técnica por la que entiendo que estáis aquí. A partir de ahora sí que será en inglés y lo primero que quiero agradecer es, I would say, Alex, Martin, thank you very much for being here and the floor is yours. Alex.
Sure. Thanks. Just before we beginning, just for the people who are not inside the call or the first one, we just do a brief recap about the team of the COE, how we can support you. So the team is built around two parts. The first one will be the Microsoft one, and the second one will be around AWS part. So if you have any question about SAP on Azure or SAP on AWS, we can support because we have also a team dedicated to AWS. So Martin will be on the both for the SAP knowledge, and the other one will be for the AWS part. But if I'm not mistaken, Martin has also a lot of experience with AWS. So if you have any question with the both for the future, we can support. If for today on the Microsoft team, the two people will be me and Martin. So I will just put some the information about the team, so the different certification. And if you have other request about Azure or other request about SAP on Azure with third party or anything related to analytics or anything else, we have also different people that can help you. Same with O365 and Microsoft 365 if you want to put some integration with SAP on it, because team will be integrated into SAP too. It's one of the Microsoft features. It's on the roadmap. So if you have all the question about that, we can also cover it. And for the AWS team is still under construction because I still not got the pictures for the different guys and all the certification, but that's it. Regarding the language, this year it's organized around different countries, so we can cover English, French, Spanish, Italian, German, Portuguese, Dutch, and Arabic language if you need. So basically, even if we have one people that cannot speak English, we could organize a COE to got a local language, even if it's not the best with this part, and just to translate with the other one. So feel free. And we just jump inside the SAP backup introduction in Azure. But basically, before to speak about backup, we need to understand how we can do some backup, some high availability or disaster recovery objective. In Azure, you are not dealing with server, you are always dealing with virtual machine. So you need to understand what you can use and what you cannot. So in SAP, previously we saw that there is some certified VM that you can use, and that's all. You cannot use all the VM. If it's for production environment, and if you backup, you will probably backup more a production environment than test, even if you do a backup also for the test. But the main objective will be to backup the production. So you will got these different VM series, T series, E series, M series, MV series, based on what you want, and up to 12 terabytes of RAM. So when you have decided which VM you want, you will need to decide just, okay, what is my architecture? I will not read on the previous session, but it's just the first part to understand about SAP. And if you go with SAP on Azure, you will need to understand there is two types of backup. The first one will be a backup on the HANA databases. That could be done with HANA Backup, Azure Backup, or third-party tool, and a VM backup. The VM backup will be directly linked to the OS, etc., not directly linked to the database, to the data in SAP, the SAP. So you will probably need to cover the both to get the more granularity inside your backup. So when you have decided the VM size and what kind of backup you want to use, you will need to decide how I need to deploy it, how I need to organize my SAP deployment. So for that, you will need to decide, okay, what is the region where I want to deploy it, and this region, it is suitable or not for a high availability deployment. That is a point directly on this agenda. That is the last one about the high availability. For the high availability, you will need to got normally this region with this little square, white square, where the availability zone is available. You can also do an high availability deployment for other regions, but that will be not with the better SLA for Microsoft, obviously. So you will mainly focus on the region where the availability zone is possible. So what is the availability zone? It's more like a logical group where it will explain you in Azure, you have different data center for one region. So basically, the new region are deployed with 3 data center that is organized like a triangle, where all the location was not really good for a disaster recovery with a minimum of 250 kilometers from each other, but they are just put with a minimum distance, but also to maximize the communication between the both with a latency beyond 2 milliseconds or equal 2 milliseconds to go this part. So the availability zone is here for the high availability. So you will deploy maybe one NADB in this data center and one in this other. So if you have any issue with this data center, you can continue to work with this one. So with this kind of deployment, you will get an SLA of 99% per month. But after that, you will just need to decide to deploy. If you decide to go with this part, there is also a lot of impact on the architecture, not on the design, but just on the items that we can use. And we can also decide to go with a multi-region deployment. So we will do replication like we will do with all the SAP software. So with the SAP HANA, that will be with HANA system application and also things. And we replicate the environment in another region. So if you do that, in terms of backup, you will need two backups, one for the first region and another one for the second one, because you want to avoid that all the backup remain in one region, and if this region is not available, you don't have any backup. In an high availability deployment, we want to avoid that. If you are in a single deployment, like here, with an SLA of 99% and only one VM of each, etc., etc., you will need one backup in this region, not more. So this is typically the only kind of deployment that is good for an high availability perspective with SAP or a production environment with SAP. You will never go with less than the premium disk, and you will never go less than with high availability zone or region pair if you want. So regarding the availability zone, so I just add a little scheme to give you the introduction, and also the backup will be replicated to the different region inside the same data center because it's in the same region. So here we got maybe one workload that could be your SAP application. So the UD1 will be the SAP application. So you have one SAP application here on the first data center inside your region, another one inside the region 3, and another one inside the region 2, the data center 2, sorry. So that could be a kind to create a high availability deployment. And if you do that with the availability zone in one region, you will need only one backup, because the backup is linked to a region, and the data center, the different inside the availability zone, is still linked to the region. So you can create a workload on each data center inside the region, but the backup will be still on the same region. So now we can just go to the SAP backup infrastructure. What looks like the architecture on Azure. So on Azure, you have something that is called Azure Backup. So I have explained you that in Azure Backup, you got different kind of backups that you can do. So the first one will be on the VM. So to do that, you will need to install the Azure Vm Agent that will be on the VMs that you will deploy basically inside the Azure Marketplace. So if you deploy a SUSE Linux Enterprise or etc., you can definitely go with Azure Backup to back up your virtual machine. But you back up the image of the virtual machine, not the data inside linked to the NIDB. So to do that, you will need to use another features of the Azure Backup. So to do that, you will need to do two backup with Azure Backup. The first one will be the job for the VM, and the second one will be the job for the NIDB. So if we implement the backup, we will just decide also if it's one VM or multiple VM, and the policy of the retention that we want to link to it. So after that, you can just run some little script on the Azure VM to be sure that the backup is consistent inside the Linux VM. So you can download just a little script on Microsoft Azure, that is the VM Snapshot Script. When you have done that, you will need to set up the VM Snapshot Script plugin and configuration and configure it. And when it's done, you will see if always your backup is consistent or if you have any issue, etc., etc. But this part is still not the ANA backup. It's only the VM backup, but you will need the both, because if you have a backup on the ANA, but the issue could remain on the operating system, and you want to go back or just restore the operating system, but not the full DB, or you want to restore the both maybe, and you will do the restore of the VM, and after you will do the restore of the DB with the other feature. So the other feature for Azure Backup with the ANA, it's you will got all the backing about the ANA Backup, and you got an ANA Backup plugin for ANA. So Azure Backup will just install on your ANA VM a plugin. So how we will do that? When you go to the Azure Backup portal on the Azure portal, you will discover your ANA database. And when you discover it, you will get access to different database data inside that you can backup. When it's done, you will just manage all the backing, all the system backup directly from the Azure Backup, but you can also continue to check it directly with your ANA backup to see if all is good or not. So what we could recommend sometimes is also to do a double backup, one with ANA backup and one with an Azure Backup, and you can also export some ANA backup data to a storage account to be sure. So that is also a way to do. But basically, here with Azure Backup, you will get all the different backup job. So the full, the differential, and the log backup all will be encrypted with an IES 256 key to be sure that all is compliant, and that will work like that with the Azure Backup. So how it will work if you see it directly with the primary consideration to work with Azure Backup. So that is restricted to a single container system, and that is the main focus. You will need to create a job for each ANA Backup VM. You cannot create a global job for all the VM. You have a job per VM in Azure Backup, so you will need to be sure that if you got 20 system of ANA that need to backup, that you integrate these 20 system and discover this 20 system. Because you will discover one system in one VM, but you will discover the other system in the other VM and work like you have done previously to do that. So you will got the ANA backing interface that will be streamed to Azure Backup, and Azure Backup will be just start a disk snapshot. It will do the disk snapshot, and when it's done, it will transfer it to store it directly on a storage account that you manage. Any question for the moment? I'm not sure we got any question regarding the backup, but it's quite simple to understand how Azure Backup work. How you do all what you do before today with the SAP, the ANA backup or the backup with a third party could be continued in Azure. It's not an obligation to work with Azure Backup. It's just a way to do. The different feedback that we got from Azure Backup are pretty good. That less expensive than a third-party tool that you use, but also less expensive about the software. If you need to learn about it, that could be much more expensive, because all the knowledge that you got from a third party like Vim, Veritas, anything else, it still remain in your company. But if you want to work with Azure Backup for cost design, that could be a way. But you will need to learn about it. And also, if you want, you can create a double backup, one with Azure Backup, one with a third party. It's not really necessary it's just an addition of cost and an addition of backup, and you will not got the same granularity between the two different backup software. So obviously I will not recommend it, but if you have one customer that wants something like that, like a crazy request, you can do it. After you got different third parties certified for the backup with ANA system. So you got Microsoft with the Azure Backup, you got AWS with a backup agent from AWS, same with Google Cloud, and you got the big one like Vim, Veritas, Rubrix, etc., etc. So if you want to use one of it instead of Microsoft, AWS, and Google, because that is native services from the cloud provider. But if you want to use another one like Vim, for example, you will just need to buy some license and do a bring your own license and install the software like you do in a VM, and just register the server where your VM is located, and just install the plugin like you do on-prem. So you will just target the VM where the ANA system is, and you will just do the backup like you used to do with a third party. But you will need just to deploy extra VM for the software, for the backup software. So basically, it's the design of Vim, the architecture of Vim. So here you got a physical server, a VM, or a cloud deployment. So what you need to understand with SAP, and also mainly for the backup, all the third party will work at the same way that if you are on-prem, because it's a VM, and a VM on-prem and a VM in Azure, it's not really different. You will just not manage some things on-prem, but you will manage everything on Azure and not take care about the disk, etc., etc. But for backup software, there is not really a difference, because you will still need an agent or a plugin that will be need to install on the backup console, and you will still need a link to discover the VM where are hosted the ANA system. So that will be still the same. After, it's just the way how we do the backup. So Vim do it on disk for a fast recover, obviously, but other can do it also on blob storage, and it's really up to you how you want to do that. But that you still need to get in mind, it's when you work with a third party, you will still got VM to deploy, because there is not a SaaS deployment for this solution yet. You will still need to deploy it on your subscription and link it to the VM that is or the AnaDB and configure everything. But that could be a better backup with more granularity that Azure Backup can offer you, but it's a different way. Any question? Martin, anything to add?
No, you're perfect. Please continue.
Great. So we have almost done all what we can do with the backup, because the backup is something really easy to do. Not really easy to do. How can we say that? It's mandatory, and there is not many ways to do it. So the only purpose of this presentation today with the backup, before we jump inside the high availability deployment, is just to explain you, okay, you got Azure native solution to backup ANA. But if you don't want to use, you can continue to work like you used to do with third party, but you will just need to install. And that is the two ways to do it. There is no other way, no other thing that is certified by SAP. You can try to do a backup with a backup software certified by SAP, but you will lose everything if you have any issue, because if it's not certified by HANA, it's not compliant and you don't have any support. So now we have so that we can jump directly how to configure, how to create an high availability deployment on Azure with SAP. So we will cover different things because, as I have mentioned, when you have SAP HANA, you have all kind of backup. When you have with NetUser, with AnyDB, etc., you will work with other backup for the SQL. You can continue to use Azure Backup, but it's a trivial thing because it's not linked to an AnyDB that need a certified backup. If you want to backup AnyDB, you can use what you want, pretty much. So for that, we are mainly focused. So with NetUser, when you want to deploy a high availability deployment, that is something like that. So you will got the on-prem network here with a gateway. That could be a VPN gateway, or that could be an express route, and a gateway in Azure to do the connection. So the difference between a gateway and an express route is, first of all, price, and second part, that will be one based on your network, so on your internet broadband, and the second one will be a direct link with Microsoft. So the difference between the both is if you got a link around 1 gigabyte of internet, or maybe 10 megabyte. 10 megabyte is clearly not enough to work with SAP, but 1 gigabyte is quite interesting to work with. So if you have a huge bandwidth, obviously you will not need an express route. Instead of it's dedicated request from your RFP or your end customer to got a dedicated link with Azure. So if you want to do that, you will need to deploy an express route, request to a telecom systems implementation, and you will got a cost for the telecom system and a cost for the network after, and that will just grant you a guaranteed bandwidth around 50 megabyte to 50 gigabyte. So it will depend about the size and the price that you want to put. And after, you will just connect like you used to do with gateway. So the only thing is here, if it's a VPN, that is a VPN gateway. Here, if it's an express route, that is an express route gateway. When you are connected to the gateway, you will just be connected to a jump box. You will not be directly connected to everything here. So how we can organize that? We have a network topology around hub and spoke. So it's like a DMZ. So this is a hub where all the different VNet will be paired. So these VNet have no internet connection directly. These VNet have internet connection available to grant you the access to the VPN gateway, or to grant also the connection to the ID management with the Active Directory. And all the rest will be just connected by a peering and a VNet to VNet link. So this VM can communicate to this one, but this one cannot attack internet from this one, etc., etc. So here you got the SAP Web Dispatcher, the SAP application, the SAP Central Service Cluster, and the database. So basically, this deployment is already an high availability deployment because you got different things with inside the same data center replicate on different VM through availability set. So the availability set, it's a kind of availability zone, but with less restriction, because the availability zone is based on the data center. So it's a logical group on a data center for the different data center inside your region. So if you are in West Europe, you have 3 data centers, and the availability zone is a logical group around these 3 data centers. And an availability set is just a logical group inside a data center. So here you got 2 VM that is inside an availability set. So these 2 VM will be not attached to the same rack, to the same disk, to the same server. So if you have any issue with a server or a rack of disk, you can have 1 VM down, but not the boss. Same thing there, same thing there. And if you are on an availability zone, you can have an issue with 1 data center, 2 data center, but if you have 3 VM, you are covered. Obviously, all these different services are replicate each other. The availability set or the availability zone is just a logical group to guarantee that the data and that the VM that not store on the same rack, on the same disk, on the same data center, but you will not take anything about the replication. So how you do that with this part? So you will just do, if you use maybe SQL, do a SQL replication, mirroring, or always on. And when you do that, you got an availability deployment. After, if you want to got more than an availability deployment, but deploy to a secondary region, you will need obviously a second express route link or a second gateway to the other region. So this one could be West Europe, and this one could be French Central, for example. And here you will use Azure Site Recovery to do the disaster for all the infrastructure instead of CDB. So all this part, the SAP Web Dispatcher, the SAP application, the SAP Central Service Cluster, the ID, the shared, the Gembox, etc., could support a downtime, obviously, because you will not need to got an instant replication if you have 5 or 10 minutes in terms of RPO, and RTO is not something that could really impact your business. But if you have any issue with the NADB, that could be much more different. And also because SAP is not a DB that, even if you use a SQL, that will request a lot of latency. Here you will not use Azure Site Recovery for the backup. So you will just deploy another VM, install all the DB, and just set up a DB replication from the source to the target. And if you need to start the failover because this region is done, you will just start Azure Site Recovery. It will create all the different things based on what is replicate, and your DB it's already up and running because you have all the information with the replication. So if it's maybe the replication stop at 12, at 12.1, you can connect to this one and just continue to work and just read on the link with the VNet, etc. So how it's working with a kind of another explanation. So you have saw the global scheme, and here it's just a scheme with all the information that you need. So you got, first of all, an Active Directory and the SSO that is done, but that's all to do the connection. And you have the primary region where you have the SAP server and the SAP, and all the traffic will be goes through the express route. And you got the different cell order requests that will be reached to the SAP SES, and that will request to the SQL server, to the SQL server. So in the first region, you have a SQL server as a primary, and you have a second one as a standby with the SQL always on that is only available with SQL Enterprise, and you got the replication. And here you got the different data for the both. So you got manage disk here and manage disk here. You don't have any replication between the both disks because all is taken care by the SQL replication. And just below, if you want to got another region, you will got another VM with the disaster with the SQL server always on, and it's in another region. And all the rest will be taken charge by Azure Site Recovery. So this is how to do an high availability deployment with Azure. You deploy what you use to deploy, the VM, and you just add Azure Site Recovery and replication, and also the availability zone or the availability set. You just add logical group in Azure and Azure Site Recovery. So that is not really complex because they still deal about VM. And after that, a little bit of native service in Azure. And also, if you don't want to use Azure Site Recovery, but maybe you want to use another software that you can do, where you can do disaster recovery like Vim, you can too, but you will need extra VM to do that with Vim software, with the gateway, with the proxy, etc., etc. So now we have saw how to do that with AnyDB and also with NetUser. We will need to check with S4HANA because it's a little bit different because you cannot use SQL always on because you are based on an HANA replication. So we have some common things about the deployment. The top, the hub and spoke topology with an hub that is your DMZ and a spoke that is where your services are hosted will be not changed. The VNet peering will be not changed. The gateway with VPN gateway or express route will not change. All these things will not change at all. After, for the NFS, in HANA, you can use a Glutter or a pacemaker NFS through the license that you can get with SUSE and Red Hat, or you can use also a basic NFS, or you can use also a native services from Microsoft that is called Azure NetApp Services. But obviously, Azure NetApp Services is really, really expensive, and you can just work with 4 TB. So we will not recommend it instead of its a specific requirement about a huge number of IOPS that is needed on the NFS cluster because Azure NetApp file can go to 80,100 IOPS. So you have different things that you can manage with this part, but it's quite expensive. So we will not obviously need it. So you have also the way to do the NFS, but in the design, I just mentioned Azure NetApp because we just about a design in Azure. And it's just the same things. We got the SAP application, the SAP dispatcher pool, and the SAP central service cluster. And the load balancer, obviously, because we got different VM in the data center. So basically, with this one, we got an high availability deployment in one data center. If that will be in different data center in the same region, you just need to replace a availability set by availability zone, and that's all. But now we want to create a disaster recovery for the secondary region. And we want to be sure that all will work perfectly. So for the NFS, you can use Azure NetApp file and create another Azure NetApp file in the other region and set up a replication, etc., etc. So it's quite expensive, but you can. If you want to use pacemaker cluster or another NFS storage, classic one, you can do, but you will just need to integrate it inside Azure Site Recovery because all this part could be covered for disaster recovery by Azure Site Recovery from Microsoft, but the NIDB cannot do. For the NADB, you will just need to deploy another VM certified by Microsoft because it's a part of your production environment. It's not a test. So if it's a test, you can avoid to put a certified, but if it's one, obviously use the same VM. And you will just need to set up the ANA system replication. So the IHS replication to replicate the database from the other location. And when you got a disaster, you will just need to start the Azure Site Recovery to mount the VM based on the replication disk that you got. And after that, that's all, because you have already the ANA system up and running, ready, and with the last test replication that it can grant you through the ANA system replication. So with this idea, you got the smaller RPO and an RTO possible, because what is critical, it's mainly the ANA. So the ANA will be never on a huge RTO on RPO. It will be just the one based on the ANA system application, and the rest will be based on a classic RPO and RTO around 4 hours or less if you have a small environment. That could be much more faster, but I will always give you 4 hours because we cannot be sure at 100% that will be not less or more. With 4 hours, we are pretty covered because that's up to you to do that. It's not an automatic thing. You can start the failover when the replication is stopped with the site recovery, but you will need to start the failover. You can script it, but you will need to start. So same things, but now about the little bit of explanation. So same things. You have all the action that will be initiated from the on-prem. So you have the connection to the express route or the VPN gateway. All the traffic will be go to the apps and the SES. It will just request the SAP ANA-DB. The SAP ANA-DB got a primary one and a secondary one with the ANA system replication. And you have the data that is put on premium disk for the both. And for the secondary region, you have another VM with storage for the Q&A and storage for the DA, for the disaster recovery, sorry, and all the same things with an ANA system application. So this part is a little bit asynchronous and this part is synchronous. This one is just asynchronous due to the network because through the network it's a little bit complex to work directly with asynchronous part. And if you have any change, you just need to start. So now just about the ANA disaster recovery, how you will work with the kind of replication. So it is the same things. Here, if it's on 2 regions, you will have just 2 VM, one in one region, one in another region, and with the ANA system replication, and the rest with Azure Site Recovery. If it's one region with 2 VM, so you have first here a replication on the 2 VM with asynchronous and with an asynchronous to the other region due to the network and the latency. And the last part could be one region with 2 ANA deployment. And so you have one system ANA that is replicated to the other one with asynchronous, another asynchronous replication to the other region, and here asynchronous replication if you want to go to VM. So this one is the ultra performance of high availability, but it's also more expensive. So the balance between the three or all the deployment in high availability you want, it's one kind of RTO, RPO you want, and what is the prerequisite and request for your end customer. So I have just mentioned also in a slide what can be covered by Azure Site Recovery inside the design and what cannot be covered. So obviously all that is link to the web dispatcher application, central services, or Active Directory, we will recommend to use Azure Site Recovery to do the replication of the data to another region. But after, if you plan to do some direct replication for the ID, obviously work with Azure Active Directory replication with the GFR, and for the rest, for the DB, with Oracle DB, you have the automatic Oracle software that you can use, the SQL always on replication for the SQL DB, and the HANA system replication for the HANA system. So there is no native tool from Microsoft for any cloud provider to do this part, because it will be always linked to the software. The purpose of the cloud provider is not to reinvent the wheel, it's just to give you a capability to work with more scalability and less investment on the hardware part, but all the rest will be the same things that you use to manage on-prem. And this is just a small scheme about Azure Site Recovery and how you can work with Azure Site Recovery. So when you perform an Azure Site Recovery, you will need to configure the replication about your Azure VM. When you have done that, you will configure the networking. So the networking will be based on what you have created on the top at the beginning. So you will need to be sure that all the embed spoke as well create to be well replicated. When you do that, you create a recovery plan and you add the virtual machine to the failover. So here in my design, I got one public IP, so we got one public IP here. So pay attention, this public IP will be not exactly the same of this one, because a public IP is linked to region. So if you have also some DNS linked to this public IP, what you can do is create a public IP here already and mention it on your recovery plan to use this one and not to create a new one, and add this one directly to your DNS. After that, for the load balancer, we just recreate exactly what you got with the rule, and all the disk here linked to your infrastructure will be stored on a replicate here. So this one, you can just forget it. It's if you want to do an Azure Site Recovery with all the workloads that SAP, because you will not use this one for SAP. If you have just a SQL basic SQL basic deployment, you can use it, or MySQL deployment, you can, but if you want to work with SAP, you will not use this part. And all the data will be stored on a replicate disk. And when you will start the failover, this disk will be used to mount this different VM. And that's all. So we have covered pretty everything about the availability. So if you need to keep something in mind about this session, before I just go to the conclusion side, it's for the backup. You have Azure Backup, but you can use also third-party backup. It's really up to you and what the request and the requirements that you got with your customer, and also the RFPs that you answer. If you got a request like, we got Vim for the backup software and we want to continue to use it on the cloud, or that could be Veritas, or that could be Commvault, you can answer yes, you can, but you will need to do the deployment of this solution in Azure and respect the requirement of the deployment. So if it's a VM, you will need a VM. If it's a storage account, you will need a storage account, and that's all. After that, to link it to the HANA DB, it's just configuration about how to link this third party to the HANA part. If you have a request like, I want to move my SAP landscape inside Azure, and I want to get information about it, you can just put always native service solution and mention, as I have done every time on this part. You can use also third party if you want, but We will just need to know what, because obviously you can advise your end customer, but you will never decide for him. So if you want to use Vim and you prefer Veritas, you will implement Vim, obviously. So that is what about the backup. And for the availability, it's just up to the RTO and RPO that you need. And for Azure, take in mind Azure Site Recovery for all that is not related to the database. Software replication for the database, so you will need another VM, and availability zone for a deployment across data center inside the region, availability set for logical group inside a data center of a region to be sure that is not stored in the same rack of disk and the same server, and other region if you want. So we can deploy everything with this part, but we can also advise you. So if you have some request, take that also in mind. The support that we can offer you with Take Data is not limited to this webinar. So if you have real project, you can ask us to support you on this part, to create the design, to explain you what we use this part instead of use this part, etc., etc. Why we will not use Azure NetApp File? Because we will not need a huge amount of performance that will be requested. Azure NetApp File, all the rest can handle it pretty fast, but it's really less expensive, because at the end, we will not create a big war machine if you don't need one. If you need one, we can create it, but if you don't need one, we will just create what you need and also not put some additional cost that is not necessary. So about the scenarios, so you can use Azure to create a disaster recovery, because what we have saw with the other region could be the on-prem and an Azure region. So you can do that also if you want. So if you want, you can use Azure to create development and test production. You can create production environment, but you can create disaster recovery or use Azure just to put some archive, etc., etc. And the benefit, it's basically the benefit of the cloud. I have already explained it on the first session. So the TCO reduction, etc., etc. But mostly the main interest part is if you need to create a disaster recovery on this session, it's your on-prem, you will need another site, you will need another server, you will need another backup license, you will need anything that you have on-prem at twice. On Azure, you will just need the license, obviously, but you will not need to got another site, another team dedicated to this site, etc., etc. So the last slide will be just about what we can offer you with Take Data on all the SAP. So basically, we still got access to local pre-sale for the Azure with all the local team. So Rafa got pre-sales locally in Spain for Azure part. If you need anything else, you will got access to the theory every time that you need with the knowledge for SAP and all the knowledge about Azure. You will get access also to the different click-to-run solutions that we have deployed through Stream 1, like the Veritas, like the Vim. So if you need to deploy a Vim backup application or a Vim backup exe in Azure, you can use our click-to-run to do that. You will get also all the CSP offering and optimization cost with experts like us, with Martin. So if tomorrow come to us with a request about a SAP, I want to deploy a SAP, you can got all the information, and we just take a time with you to think about what kind of optimization we can do, because maybe in 1 month earlier we got a new certification with new VMs that is more faster but also cheaper, so we will use it instead of use the ones that you mainly use. And we can combine offer with Microsoft. So if you need to work with Microsoft to promote an offer, we can help you on this part. We will help you also to create a portfolio around your SAP solution. So if you want, we can help you to create like a backup offer in Azure with SAP. And after that, we got all the super offerings to CSP and the delivery and consult teams through our service team. So if you have any question, feel free to ask. I have covered all what I plan to cover, and I just take time for the question because the last time we got different question, pretty interesting. So we're just waiting for you.
So so far no questions have come in.
Okay.
And then I think we can conclude the call.
Yeah, if there's no question, I think we can conclude the call. So thank you everyone to be on this webinar. So there is still a last one that will be dedicated on the cost optimization, and we will learn how to quote, because we will see everything about SAP, and we will learn about to quote, and also how to migrate, because it's something that you want to see. Sorry, and that could be an interesting session. So keep in line.
So hopefully you will be back in 2 weeks from now. Thank you very much.